Hi everyone, welcome to another Sunday Speaks. I, as always, am Cheyenne Severin, and today I'm here with.
William Huhn.
Okay, and so today we wanted to talk a little bit about the holiday season because, as everybody knows, right now we just came out of Thanksgiving, and then we're gonna go into Christmas, and then it's gonna be New Year's. So it's just like a busy time for a lot of people. Sometimes stressful, sometimes fun, but it's like everyone has a different experience during this kind of period. So it's just like, should I call you William? Or do you have like
William's fine.
Will's fine? Okay, so Will.
William is fine. Yeah, Will, whatever. William's fine.
Okay. So what are the holidays like for you before we get into anything else? Like, are they stressful? Is it fun? Like what is that experience like?
It's a little stressful because I have two small children, and so that says it all. I have a 6-year-old, and I have a 10-month old, so almost 10 months. So this holiday is going to be particularly challenging, if that's the right word.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yes, but it's also a very lovely time, and takes a lot of effort. But it's effort well spent, and so it's going to be a wonderful holiday, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm. So, do you find yourself like, I know we just talked a little bit about it, but do you often find yourself like stressed during this period? Is it a time where it's like things get a little more hectic?
Yes, of course, and but just like all our lives, they're pretty hectic as it is. I think the best thing to do is just to find intervals where you can just feel the spirit of the holiday, the spirit of Christmas, or Hanukkah or whatever it is you celebrate. And when that happens, try to let that flow forward as much as possible. So if you have an hour where you find yourself with your brother-in-law having a great conversation about something, um, and just my feeling is to cherish that moment. That's what I try to do. That's how I get through the holidays.
Mm-hmm.
If get through them is the word. If you want to call that the expression, but to me, I try to find the most wonderful aspects of it. Or if you notice your some your Christmas decorations or your neighbors or something like that are particularly beautiful this year, try to grab that moment, hold on to it, and also let it go. That's also important.
So I know that your grandmother was one of the vital links in founding AA. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you're not in recovery yourself, are you?
I'm not, no.
Yeah. But
By grace be to God,
yeah.
you know, because I know it could happen to anybody if they have that tendency.
Hmm.
So, and it's not their fault.
So just having that family history, if you want to talk a little bit about your grandmother, because I want to ask, like, just knowing what you do about AA and having that kind of family link, is there any lessons that you like take from who your grandmother was, or like what she hoped to accomplish, and like you apply it into your everyday life? So it's just, I think talking a bit about your grandmother and having some of that background information would be good before we went a little deeper into that. So like, who was Henrietta to your knowledge? Like, did you know her at all, like in person, or did you guys not get the
Yeah.
chance to meet?
Yeah. So she died when I was 16, and she was a part of our lives. I didn't see her that all that much, but I saw her for 2 weeks a year.
Mhm.
And we went on a family vacation in West Hampton Beach. And during that time, she was continually trying to instill good values into us. So that I take with me my whole life, and they weren't values that had anything to do with AA necessarily. I mean, they overlap, of course, but she wasn't talking about them in the framework of AA.
Yeah.
Um, she was just constantly saying, don't, basically, don't be heedless. That was a word she loved, and always try to instill values of honesty and hard work, and things like that. And don't be slovenly. She liked that expression too. She was from the South, so she had all these little Southern expressions. And but she was a lovely person. And towards the end of her life, she talked more about AA, but she didn't. She was always someone who was very self-effacing. So she never was trying to get credit for it. But she did like to tell the stories, but especially more towards the end of her life, because as you know, as people get older, especially when they get in a reflective part of their lives, they begin to want to tell stories about what their lives have consisted of. But it was never in the framework of trying to take credit. And that's what it's so important for people to understand. In other words, the anonymity part went with her as well. She wasn't interested in attaching her name to it. And although it's certainly as well attached at this point.
Hmm. And you're helping to make that happen in a way, right?
Yeah, so it's funny because people ask questions, the kind of questions you're asking now, and they do know a little bit about her life. But this journey has been one for me as well, because until I really started delving deep into our family's papers and papers elsewhere, and Stan Hewitt, where she lived a good part of her life, I hadn't known how heavily involved she was. So it's been very eye-opening for me. I mean, I knew she was more than was out there. I knew that people kind of didn't have the story they had wasn't quite right, and also the story that was hidden. I knew there was a hidden story. I had no idea how deep that ran.
Um, I know you have a book coming up, so I don't want to ask you to give anything too much away, but is there anything that like stands out to you? Like, do you have a more specific story with any of that?
Well, I will say, because I've already said this in various speaking things, that the anonymity part, the book's anonymousness, and the fact that AAs don't use their names at all was completely her doing.
Mm-hmm.
So she was one who decided to do that. She's the one that decided it was best to not use names. And the interesting thing about that is people think that it's done because of some sort of shame or something like that. Like you're supposed to hide it so that people don't think badly of you. And it's quite the opposite. She thought that you should tell everyone you can that you're an alcoholic and that you're in recovery, because she thought that would help you stay in recovery, because you'd be there'd be an additional layer, not just your higher power. She would say not just God, but it would be also you'd have a commitment to your the people you know and love, whether at work or anything. They know that you're doing something, but not that you're doing something in any way negative, but that you're doing something that's actually ethical by going to recovery. You're doing something for your family and your friends and in yourself by going to recovery. So that's the way she saw it. Mm-hmm. Now, the anonymity part was simply because she didn't want anyone to be boasting if some, like you hear now, even you hear, oh, so-and-so saw some movie star or something, in the rooms, things like that, right? And you're not supposed to say that, but people do chat. But imagine if it was all in the open. Like the papers would say, Anthony Hopkins or someone is seeking help or something like that. I don't know that he is or not. I'm just simply saying. But imagine if that were the headlines, you see, and you couldn't properly run an organization with that sort of outward worldly pressure, you see. So that's why she wanted to go for the anonymity. Mm-hmm. And as far as the book concerns, Bill originally wanted to name it, say by Bill Wilson, and and so that's another thing. So she said, no, Bill, you can't do that. She had to constantly sort of drop him down a notch.
Hmm.
Now, again, there's also this idea out there that I've seen, and that is that Bill and Henrietta were sort of circling each other and kind of at odds. When in fact, that's really not true at all. They had a small rough patch in the 50s when she didn't want to have the big convention and go to an elected trust. It's complicated, but I get into it in the book. But they
Hmm.
had this little disagreement then, which was big for them. But then they went right back to being the best of friends. And they Henrietta and Bill are two people that were friends for life since they met in 1935.
Hmm.
And they were dear friends until the day Bill died. And so that's another thing I clear up, which I'm glad I have a chance to do.
Hmm. What is it like, just on a more general note, to like dive more into your family history and just like learn more about kind of like in a sort of way like
So this is my son here. Dad, come here. This
hi.
is we had his great grandson.
Oh my God. Hi.
All right, Dasha, let me finish this up, okay? Anyway, I'm sorry, forgive me.
No, you're fine. So seeing the future of your family, what is it like to get into the past? You know, just as a general thing. Like what is that feeling like?
So that is also a little crazy. One second, let me just close this door for you.
Oh, you're
Dasha,
fine.
just let me finish, okay? Okay. Sorry.
No, you're fine.
Yeah, thank you. So could you repeat your question? Do you mind?
Oh, yeah. So just like as a general note, like how does it feel to just like get into your family's past, just to like learn all of these things, just like and find out more about a person that like you knew, but it's like now you're really just like getting into who they were.
That's a very good question. It's fascinating because it's so intense. Now this book is very long. It's about because she lived till 92,
Hmm.
and she she was she had a very rich life. Not just with the AA stuff, but she was an opera singer
Hmm.
and stuff like that at one point. She could have been a concert pianist. She was that talented. Um, but yeah, it's very interesting because I find that the more after I started getting really into it, and I literally go through every year. I have enough papers and enough documentation that I can really go through every year of her life. Sometimes I have diaries, and sometimes on a day-to-day basis, and I know her far more than I could have imagined ever knowing her. And of course, I know her more than any of my other family members. So it's nice that I can share a lot of stuff with them, and that they'll. One of the great things is that they'll be able to know their grandmothers they never have before.
Hmm.
But also in terms of what's it like? It's fascinating because I've had two dreams about her. I haven't dreamt of her maybe in my entire life, but maybe I did 30 years ago when she was still living or something like that. I may have. But I don't remember, of course, but I've had dreams of her a couple of times. And it's very strange because one dream, it was in, she was in her 20s. And that would, or maybe in her 20s or 30s, but it was during sort of the flapper era. And I was there sitting at a table with her, and she knew that I was writing about her. And she said, "Oh, you're just here because you're writing about me?" And I said, "Yes," or something like that. That's the general. And she was wearing 1920s, like Dorothy Parker flappers clothing.
Hmm.
It was crazy. And she was young. She was just, and of course I never met her young. And, so that's kind of the effect of it. It's a pretty deep dive.
Hmm. Going back to the lessons that she was able to teach you, like later in her life, how do you practice those in like your day-to-day life, just like those things that she instilled in
Yeah, that's a very good question. Her standards were so high,
you?
um, ethically and morally and spiritually. In her worldview, the idea was to there's a quote of hers from a transcript she made in 1971 where she talks about how people were always trying to they didn't want to scare away alcoholics from receiving help by talking too much about God. And you probably have heard this quote where she says, and I'm misquoting. I kind of want to do it exactly. But one of the lines is, the alcoholics have been pleasing themselves all these years. It's time that they please God, you know. So that's kind of where she was coming from. So imagine having that standard. Um, but and she said that with compassionately because really she knew that if they didn't try to live according to their higher powers, um, according to the will of their higher power, that they would suffer.
Yeah.
So that's where she was coming from. She was an extraordinarily compassionate person. So there's no like, oh, they've been pleasing themselves all these years. No, it wasn't like that.
Yeah.
It was an acknowledgement that they, for the first time, are living selfless lives, and that's what they need to continue to do. So that said, yes, I mean, I'm always. It's interesting because it's kind of like that's the standard now. Of course, I don't live up to it. I try my best, but we all try our best. But it's there, and it's not just before I did this project. I was a good person and stuff like that. But now I see it all much deeper.
Yeah.
So I'm not just trying to be a good person. It's kind of on a level of how am I in relation to universal beings, in relationship to God, higher power, whatever you want to call it. How am I living in a way that fosters my sort of universality to all fellow human beings, kind of like that. It's just a bigger context than I'm aware of now.
Hmm. Just being able to say things from like a different perspective.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I see exactly from a different perspective and a larger perspective in
Yeah.
many ways.
So, okay. Tough. Okay. Tough thing to live up to, I guess.
Yeah, although it is, but it's also enjoyable to have that knowledge that there's something to live up to, and so
Hmm.
it's not really a burden. It's a lightening, because you can kind of let it go. As she said, let go and let God. So it's a kind of a letting go as well.
Well, we have about 3 minutes left. So before we close off on today, want to circle back to the holidays and everything. So after having like this little discussion and everything, reflecting on everything for the holidays, it's like, is there anything that you've learned that's relevant to dealing with the holidays? You know?
Yes. Yes. Well, one thing I learned is that, holidays are, so my grandmother, after she began going to the Oxford group, she realized that when she began to have in what she would say her personal relationship with God,
Hmm.
she she would have viewed at that point the holidays, Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever holiday you celebrate, primarily Christmas and Hanukkah, I would say, or whatever other winter holiday you celebrate. But to her, she was aware, of course, she was a Christian and also very much aware of Judaism. But she would have viewed these holidays as sacred times. And that's what they really are for everybody. So that's a thing that I look at more now. And I think that helps all of us when we celebrate the holidays, not just getting together and, having some, a nice feast and whatnot, seeing your friends. That's all very nice, but there's something behind it,
Mm-hmm.
which is sacred. And it's important to, at some point, step away and think about that. And I don't say that in any sort of cliche way. I just say it doesn't matter how you do it, but just try to reflect on what the time means. Even if it were, let's say it were a pagan, a pagan ritual, it's still something that culture follows. And it's sacred. It's sacred. But that's what I think, and that's where we gather strength. And that's where we gather strength to help us through the year. That's my view of it, and that would be Henrietta's as well.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Before we close off today, do you have any last comments, questions, concerns you want to bring up?
No, I just want to say one thing that this was going to be my first book. I have a lot of things like essays and poetry published, and this is going to be my first book. But I'm glad to say that I just actually got a word that my first book will actually be a collection of poetry.
Woo!
So I got a book deal. So I'm very happy about that. And if I may just say, it's going to be called Bachelor Holiday, and it's going to be my first book. I'm very proud of that. My grandmother would be as well. So this will actually be my second book by the time it comes out. I imagine this is going to come out, not the poetry, but the first book probably in about a year, like on the shelves in about a year. I only have about 20 to 30 pages to go.
Oh wow.
In terms of yeah. So very exciting all around. So
Do you have a title for that yet?
hold on one second. It's the Henrietta book. Right now I'm calling it The Picture of Henrietta Seiberling. But that may change, how they publishers go.
Okay. I'll let you go. Thank you so much.
I didn't expect that's Darth Vader to come through the room. So
Oh, you're good. We're out of time anyway. Thank you so much for coming on today.
thank you so much, and I love being here. And happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah to everybody.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.